All right, good morning. It's a brand new week. How was your weekend? Hope it was good. The weather was good here where we are, and we just had a great time. Saturday, ended up doing a lot of little work around here, getting the studio all finished up. So now, if you look, you can't see it, but I've got two little sets in both directions, and the one behind me. And so the Tamsin I got in here and finished up looks good, and so we're excited about that. Yesterday, man, church was so good yesterday. We talked about gratitude. Really is kind of a primer to really propel your life forward, spiritually speaking. You know, there's all kind of theology that we can talk about in order to grow yourself spiritually. But then there's certain attitudes that if you can latch hold of and let them just get all in you, man, it moves you so fast forward spiritually. And one of them is gratitude. And so we talked about that yesterday. And then we celebrated my baby boy's birthday. He's 23. He was our late in life guy. And we just celebrated him yesterday. Had some great stir fry. It was just a great day. Brent and Abby and the kiddos came over, and Rachel was with us. So we just had great fun. And I hope your weekend was good too. They come and go pretty quick. It's important that we take advantage of those when they come, and when you can get with family, even better. And so hope yours was great. Hey, let's jump into the book of Acts, chapter 19. We're actually going to finish up chapter 19 today, Lord willing. It's really kind of it deals with a riot. But before we get there, I just want to kind of clean up a few things that are going on here. So as we know, Paul has been in Ephesus now for about 3 years. He's been teaching there, and it's been powerful. And so the church is effective. In verse 20, we're going to look at 21, but let's start at 20. It says, in this way, the word of the Lord spread and prevailed. It dominated, right? People came to Christ. They were repenting of their sins. They were bringing out their magic books and everything else that just they had been putting stock in. For you and me, that would translate to everything, really, a world philosophy, worldliness, all of those things. What they were bringing was their way of life and going, hey, we don't need this anymore. Man, they were in this pagan town full of temple worship, prostitution, not drugs, but convicts and all of that. It's everywhere. And so they've removed themselves from that, laid everything at the altar, burned the books, and like, hey man, all we need is Jesus. And so they're growing at a rapid rate. The gospel's really prevailing, and they're a bold church. They are a purged and purified church. And those are two crucial terms that we've seen through the book of Acts. But a bold church is an effective church, and it's effective at disrupting evil. That's what it does. They don't run around saying, like little police, stop doing this and stop doing that. They live a holy life, and as they transform, it disrupts society. So you have a whole host of people now in Ephesus that are no longer buying artifacts of the little idols, and all of that practice they're beginning to withdraw from, because they've found the real meaning of life. And that's disruptive to Satan and to everything else. So you can expect an all-out assault. Persecution doesn't come because we're arrogant and obnoxious. It comes because we boldly live out our faith, living out the truths of the scriptures. And it's just an important clarity's sake. Because that's what's taking place. So let's look at this in verse 20. It says, "In that way, the word of the Lord spread and prevailed." 3 years Paul's been there. The work started with Priscilla and Aquila when he left them there on his way back to Antioch. He comes back. There's a flourishing church. In the meanwhile, Apollos, a very skilled orator, who was an Old Testament saint in that sense that he knew there was a Messiah and he believed in Messiah. He just hadn't met the Messiah. And so he's transformed. The Spirit of God comes on him. Now he's in great power. Paul is teaching at the Hall of Tyrannus, and he's been doing that for 3 years. And as a result of that, and people coming and going on this highway and byway, the Word of God has just spread all over Asia. And for that deal, we're talking about Asia Minor. And if you look at church history, you'll realize that during this time period, I think all of the 7 churches in Asia Minor, which we call the 7 churches in the book of the Revelation, they've all been established. So Asia has really, the gospel is rooted in there. And it's an amazing thing to see happen. So the word's spreading mightily. and there's this big wind that's going on, and so we see all that. So Paul got the traveling itch again. He feels like, okay, man, we've done our job here. And it says, verse 21, after these events, Paul resolved by the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem. So what Paul plans to do now is head west again, head back to Europe, and he wants to go through Macedonia and Achaia and then go down to Jerusalem. And then he says, after I've been there, he said, it is necessary for me to see Rome as well. So he's on a mission. I don't want you to understand this. He's a missionary, as we all should be, but he's powerful in the sense that he wants to reach the unreached, and he's going as far as he can go. And so this is what's taking place. Macedonia and Achaia. Here's what he was doing there, because we know when he wrote, that's where Corinth is. He wrote to them, hey, when I come, I need you to make sure you have some money ready, because I'm collecting it to take it to Jerusalem. So part of his reason was to go back through these was, one, to check on them, but two, to really collect money so he can get it to the Jerusalem church. And I love that concept. Paul is not just so minded on the word and the teaching of that he doesn't live out the whole gospel of love, the aspect of caring for your brother. So while he's loving and devoted to God, he's also loving and devoted to people, and he knows the Jerusalem church is in need of money. And so his next journey, and this is what we see in these two verses, he's heading that way. I'm going to Macedonia. I'm going to collect some money in that area. I'm going to go down to Jerusalem. Then I'm going to Rome. And so you see what Paul has done is he's taken the highway from Antioch to Rome. And in that whole area, his goal is to dot churches all along that area, to plant the gospel, and then see it go from that road, the main road, for people to begin to carry it out into the highways and byways. This was his strategy. We know that in the end of the book of the Romans, he says, I've got a goal to go to Spain too. Now, he never made it, but his goal was to go from Rome and then, man, just to hit it and move down to Spain, because at that time, Rome is just now taking over Spain. It's being conquered. They're still growing in that sense, and so they're down there. And so this is what's going on. Listen to what he says to the Corinthian church, and then we're gonna jump into the riot that took place. It says in 1 Corinthians 16, he says, I will remain in Ephesus until Pentecost. So he sends a letter. It says, after sending to Macedonia, two of those who assisted him, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. So he's been there for 3 years already. Now, he sends Timothy and Erastus, probably with the letter of the Corinthians, to them. And he says this, I will remain in Ephesus until Pentecost for a door of effective ministry, and there are many who oppose me. He's like, man, hey, the ministry is effective, and I've got a lot of opposition. Those are two things that Paul loved, to see the ministry prevail and to see the opposition to do damage for the kingdom. That's what we used to say in our youth ministry years ago. That phrase comes up. He just wanted to do damage for the kingdom of God in the kingdom of this world and assault Satan. And so that's what he's doing. Now, and he does it well. So now we come to verse 23. And we're just going to hear the story. There's not. Let's just look at and see what unfolds. After that, about that time, there was a major disturbance about the way. So Ephesus is what we just said. The Christians they're getting larger in number. They're reaching other places. They're beginning to branch out. So almost any city you go to, you hear about the Christians, what they're calling the way, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. So Jesus is the way. So they're preaching that. Not one of many ways, but the way, just so we're clear. And so it's created quite a disturbance, because the gospel, when people begin to live it out, affronts the false narrative of Satan, and it creates great opposition. So that you don't find your pleasure in sin, so that you serve the living God. You don't have idols. All of these things just wreaks havoc upon a city from several different areas. One is financial. Two is from a moralistic deal, which is good for society that's gone, but not for the people who want to live an immoral lifestyle and who profit off that immoral lifestyle. And so this is what's going on there. And so it says this. For a person named Demetrius, a silversmith who made silver shrines of Artemis, provided a great deal of business for the craftsmen. So there's this big CEO, Demetrius. He's got these outposts and franchises everywhere. That's what it says, right? A great deal of business for the craftsman. So he's got craftsmen underneath him. He's got this vision. I want an idol in every home, so to speak, right? I just want him in there. So he's got this business, it's an empire, and he's doing it based on selling trinkets, these idols of Artemis, so you can have it in your home and you can remind yourself that, oh yeah, great is Artemis of the Ephesians, right? And so that's what he's all about, the patriotic thing of their country and all of that stuff. Got a great business going on, except for the fact that now the Christians are taking that stuff and they're like, we don't need it anymore. And so he's seeing his business drop. And so this is what's going on. For a person named Demetrius, a silversmith who made silver shrines of Artemis, provided a great deal of business for the craftsmen. Right? So when he had assembled them, so there's this guild or like a union of all of these craftsmen. He gets them together and goes, hey man, we're starting a tank here. We need to do something. Men, you know that our prosperity, verse 25, is derived from this business. Hey man, you're making a living. I'm making a living. I'm making a lot bigger than you, but whatever. You see and you hear not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this man Paul has persuaded and misled a considerable number of people by saying that gods made by hands are not gods. Listen, there's this man out there, this maniac, Paul, he's going everywhere and he won't shut up. And he's telling people that there's only one God. Well, that's bad for business. And so we don't need that. Not only, he says, verse 27, do we run a risk that our business may be discredited, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be despised and her magnificent come to the verge of ruin, the very one all of Asia and the world worship. They're like, man, listen, he's not just he's building his case, man. He's trying to stir up trouble. He sees money oozing out. He's going to bring in every reason why he can to let's do something against it. And so he starts arguing about patriotism. Really, man, it's just the right thing to do for the betterment of the whole world. It's this whole, we're defending the world here. We're not just, wanting our way. And so this is what's going on. And he says, man, listen, the whole world's going to be affected by this one man if we don't shut him up. Isn't that amazing? That Paul would have that much leverage in Demetrius's mind, that he's got to figure out a way to get rid of all of this stuff. And so it says, when they heard this, they were filled with rage and began to cry out, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Now, I don't know where they were, but wherever they were, they just start this yelling thing. This is the beginning of a mob. This is how every person who wants to create chaos, that's what it does. You stir up the people. It's hard not to see, with our government and others, just trying to stir up the issue to change the narrative and do everything else, create these mobs. We see it all the time. We've seen it in the 60s. We see it now. We see them even happening, in Europe now. And so it's just everywhere. It's a similar thing. This is how Satan operates. You should just see that. Listen, I'm going to remind us again. There really is only two forces in this world, right? It's not conservative and liberal. It's not Republican and Democrat. It's not black and white. It's not those things. It's light and darkness. It is those who are people of light, which are you and me as believers in Christ, and those who are still in darkness, that is ruled by the evil one. Always and only two forces. You can argue all day long about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and say, well, Russia's actually the good guys because they're trying to stop the world order, and no, the Ukrainians are the good guys because they're trying to hold back communism. Listen, both of those are filled with people who are of the kingdom of light and who are of the kingdom of darkness. But it is darkness driving the chaos in both of those countries, just like it's darkness that's driving the chaos in our own country. And so just know that. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. It's important that you see that. If you leave the world of the supernatural and you bring it down into here where it's just here, then we start fighting against ourselves. And so the Democrats are opposed to the Republicans, and the blacks are opposed to the whites, and the rich against the poor, all of that, right? There's darkness and there's light. This is what we're seeing here in this narrative that we're reading now. And so that's what's going on. So what have they done? Man, they do whatever they do. What does Satan always do? Wherever there is demonic wisdom, it is earthly, natural, and it creates disorder. It creates chaos. You see chaos going around. You see disorder, and it's, man, you can't help but see that here everywhere. Every morning you wake up, there's a new reason to get anxious and fearful and worried. There's a new COVID thing coming. There's a new war happening. There's this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Our banks are going crazy, and our money, we're losing it, and it's not worth what it was. The gas prices are going up. You know what's fueling that? Evil. That's all it is. It creates chaos. Just so we're clear on that. Just that's a side note. It's all free for you this morning. I just felt chipper enough to share that with you because I think we need that perspective, we who are followers of Christ. And so it says this, verse 29. So the city was filled with confusion, and they all rushed together into the amphitheater, dragging along Gaius and Aristarchus. Now, though Gaius we've heard of, he's like a Timothy for Paul. Aristarchus, I'm not sure. We don't know much about him. But it says so they grab two of those people who they know don't embrace what they believe, and they're going to make the scapegoats out of them. So they drag them into the theater in town, the big theater, the amphitheater, and the Macedonians, who are these are Paul's traveling companions. Although Paul wanted to go in before the people, the disciples did not let him go. So Paul, he sees him getting drug in there, and Paul's like, hey, let me at him. So Paul's like, he's taking his coat off, man. He's like, hey, I'm rolling up my sleeves. Let's go. I'll stop this riot. He's not physically. He's just going to go in there and do what he does, right? Bold faith in the living God. And they're like, Paul, you need to back off, bro. We got this. You don't need, listen, we appreciate your energy, but you don't need to be doing this. Because they know what was going to happen. They would have killed Paul. So they plead with him, right? The disciples go, man, you can't. So the whole church is like, no, Paul, this is not your fight. Even some of the provincial Asias of Asia, who were his friends, sent word to him pleading with him not to venture. So even some of, not even the Christians, but the Roman rulers that come there to kind of take care of everything, they're like, Paul, you don't need to do that, bro. You need to stay where you are. And so some were shouting one thing and some another, but the assembly was in confusion. So that's just this chaos, and that's all. That's all that rioting is. It's just sheer chaos. And so it says some Jews in the crowd gave instructions to Alexander after they pushed him to the front. Again, we don't know who he is, but they're like, hey, man, you go. So he's up on the stage now looking around trying to figure out what to do, like a deer in the headlights. And this after they pushed him to the front, motioning with his hand, Alexander wanted to make his defense to the people. Like, hey, calm down. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So it just sends this thing into greater turmoil, and everybody's in this confused state. This is absolutely absurd. Then it says this, when the city clerk had calmed them down. So now one of the ruling leaders gets involved and goes, hey, stop. 2 hours they're yelling this in a theater. People of Ephesus, what person is there who doesn't know that the city of Ephesus is the temple guardian of the great Artemis and the image that fell from heaven? He said, hey, listen, the whole world knows about us in Artemis. You got no worries with this small little, the way. Therefore, since these things are undeniable, keep calm and don't do anything rash. And don't burn this place down. Don't start killing a bunch of people. Don't destroy what we've built. For you have brought these men here who are not temple robbers or blasphemers of our goddess. Listen, they're not out there trashing Diana, Artemis. They're not they're not doing these things. They're not stealing your money. So if Demetrius and the craftsmen who are with him have a case against anyone, the courts are in session. Finally, a common sense prevails, and someone's like, hey, look, these Christians aren't doing anything wrong. They're not out there doing immoral acts. They're not robbing you. They're not trashing your goddess. They're simply exalting their God, just like we're exalting ours. And they're not robbing anybody. If there's a problem here, let Demetrius handle it. Don't turn this into something bigger than it is. But if you seek anything further, it must be decided in a legal assembly. In fact, we run a risk of being charged with rioting for what happened today. Listen, that's bad news for a Roman leader in a foreign land to have Rome have to come down on you because of that. And so he's worried about his own skin. Ain't nobody in here worried about God but Paul and the believers. After saying this, he dismissed the assembly. So that's what we're going to finish up today. But what crazy stuff, right? And hey, we'll continue on with chapter 20. Man, we're getting closer to the end of this book. It's been powerful. Lord bless you guys. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you in the morning.